Ignition sequence start. Engines armed. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All engines running. Launch commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff.
Great moments are born from great opportunity. And that's what you have here tonight, boys. That's what you earned here tonight.
And I told our players, you need to be more like a dog. We don't need a bunch of cats in here looking in the mirror. Do I look good? I got my extra bands on. I got my other shoes on. Be a dog. We don't need no meows. We don't need no cats. We need more dogs.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
All right, here's what I do know, is that this team is going to take on the identity of this city, all right? And this city's been down, and it found a way to get up, all right? It's found a way to overcome adversity, all right? And so this team's going to be built on, we're going to kick you in the teeth, all right? And when you punch us back, we're going to smile at you. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down. And when we do, we're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
And we're in.
We're in, buddy.
Dude, I love that intro.
Dude, it's a great intro. I had a lot of fun making that.
For anyone curious, I was not involved with the making of the intro of the opening podcast. That was all Chuck.
I got an intuition on just I was like, I'm gonna make this our historic ground zero. And I was like, what are some historic things that have happened in the past millennia that I can toss into this thing? And I just went on a roll. Just went from there.
At the beginning, or at the end, the beginning of Dan Campbell speaking as the Detroit Lions head coach, I'm not lying, I thought it was Peyton Manning. The first 5 seconds. And then he starts talking about this city's been through adversity, and I was like,
Indianapolis?
What city was that? And
Denver?
Sure enough, and then I was like, maybe it's Drew Brees. And then it gets to the point where he's like, we're going to beat you down. We're going to take your kneecaps.
We're biting kneecaps out here.
And I was like, that's Dan Campbell, man. This is amazing. It was great.
Honestly, dude, it all fit together really well. I had to make the starting music. Obviously, all the speeches after that fit into kind of timeline.
Mm-hmm.
But towards the end, I was like, shit, I'm running out of room. I'm running out of time. I was like, wait. I was like, what if I just highlight Dan Campbell as the main man and just have him be the main speech,
the man,
and everything,
because he is the man.
He's really is the man. I'm really excited for Detroit's year.
Dude, he I don't even like Detroit, but he makes me want to run through a wall. I want to see him do well.
Being a player in that locker room would be so fucking fun. It won't be fun because they're honestly gonna fucking lose a ton of games this year. Whatever, they're a better team. But Jared Goff, dude, we gotta get him out of here.
Well, I don't know. He's just a placeholder for a little bit.
Yeah.
You just got to find the right draft pick. I don't know. Could be Stroud. Could be Young. Could be someone else.
And the hope is that even if they finish, let's say they finish and they're not the first pick, they're not the second pick, they're not even the third pick. Hopefully they can package a ton of shit together, a ton of draft capital Miami's done to get Tyreek Hill.
Yep.
Or the Rams did with us to get Stafford. That's the goal. But the thing is, Stroud and Bryce Young are so fucking good.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll see what the QB market looks like. I can see Atlanta. They got Ritter in there. They got whatever the fuck's his name is, Oregon dude. Marcus Mariota.
Gotcha. Yeah, down in Atlanta, yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if they're one of the first few picks. But
Yeah. No, it definitely could be there. Dude, I kind of think Atlanta could definitely be a boom or bust. I mean, that team could win 3 games, or honestly, they could win 9, and I wouldn't be surprised either way. And 9 right now, I think that's good enough for a playoff spot.
And the thing is, like, I remember when they took AJ Terrell, the dude from Clemson, and highlight tapes I would see back to back were Jamar Chase burning him. In the college football playoffs. In the national championship game, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like one of the best corners like in the league. Like he's a top 10 corner for sure. He's young.
Mm-hmm.
He can fucking lock down a wide receiver. Like I don't know about a top 5 wide receiver, but he's kind of a dog.
Dude, I'd say, okay, maybe Jamar Chase isn't top 5 right now as an all-around receiver. He's probably top 5 as an impact receiver.
Yeah.
And give him another year, and he will probably be a top 5 all-around receiver. So, I mean,
that
that matchup's a Pro Bowl matchup. It's a Super Bowl matchup.
The thing that's huge for that is Jamar Chase, it's the impact, right? It's, leading DBs towards Jamar Chase, and then T. Higgins is just fucking open.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the way that when you're a team that you have one truly established weapon, which at the beginning of last year, that's what the Bengals had. They just had Jamar Chase. It opens everyone up, and then everyone else can come out and flourish, and it can be really great. See, that's
Tyler Boyd, Old Faithful.
See, I'm just gonna say that's an example of good leadership.
Yeah.
When you have one player who is able to open doors for other people, and then they can both be successful. But today, I'm gonna tell you about someone who he did not do that. He did not do that at all.
Okay.
And
we're talking about leadership right now, right?
We're gonna talk a little bit about leadership. But I just want to go ahead and just give a little crack.
We love the sound.
And little. Alrighty. Okay. So, if you didn't read the title of the episode, that's fine. Adult illiteracy is real. There's no shame in it. Just get help. But
we can help you get help too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tutor you. But we're talking about Richard Nixon, the 36th Vice President of the United States, the 37th President of the United States.
Tricky dick.
Tricky fucking dick.
Oh, buddy.
So, I just want to start out. I want to give you some things that we know are absolute facts about this man, as well as we can.
We're truth seekers.
We are truth seekers. So, we're going to start off very simple. He was born January 9th, 1913. Long fucking time ago. If he was alive today, he'd be over 100 years old. But he died April 22nd, 1994. He was 81 years old. He was born in Yorba Linda, California. Born into a very poor family.
Okay.
And Yorba Linda is actually where his presidential library is today. And we'll talk a little bit about that library towards the end.
Real quick, I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure his father was a lemon farmer.
You think so?
I think so.
I do know that they were on a farm when he was young and they lost the farm.
Totally could be lemons.
Could have been lemons. I did not see specific use of the farm, but they did start on a farm when he was very young. He is known for using this quote about, when he was young they were poor, but they didn't know they were poor, along those lines. And I've never heard a historian agree with him. It's usually dude, you knew you were pretty poor. You're just pulling out some bullshit rhetoric, making people feel sorry for you, and the man, honestly, he's pretty good with his political rhetoric.
I bet.
He was pretty solid with it. He's
kind of ugly, but
he's not.
You got to be good with political rhetoric to achieve the heights he did.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things I want to talk about. Also, I mean, this guy, he actually got offered a full scholarship to go to Harvard, but he wanted to stay closer to home. So he ended up being able to go to a college called Whittier College. He got a bachelor's in history, and then he was one of the first ever students to attend Duke Law School. It was within the first 2-3 years of Duke having a law program.
Holy shit! Okay.
So I mean, in certain ways, as you're gonna see as we go through this man is almost like a real life Forrest Gump in a way. He's been around for some incredible moments through not only American history but human history. Now, after going to Duke, where he was also elected president of the Duke Bar Association, big deal, he ends up joining the Navy in 1942 and starts off as a Lieutenant JG, junior grade, 02.
Now, do you know if he's still active?
So we'll get there. But he never actually was in... He's not considered to have been, like, actually in the middle of the fighting, but he was in the Pacific during World War II. So he signs up, joins the Navy Reserve, says, I'm bored, send me out to sea. So they send him out. And he's mainly a logistics guy. He made sure everyone could get to where they needed to go to be able to win the war. And they did. And in no small part, like, he wasn't just someone, you know, in a mess hall somewhere drinking coffee, yelling at enlisted men. Because he was an officer. But he actually was doing stuff. He did important work while he was out there. So he ends up getting a couple medals while he's there too. He gets the Navy Commendation Ribbon, which is now known as the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. Big deal. Received the American Campaign Medal, the Asian Pacific Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal, and the Armed Forces Reserve Medal. And
He's
now,
the man.
well, on paper, you know, a lot of those. I'll tell you what. You put that man in a uniform, send him into a bar. He looks pretty good to any young lady who wanted to talk to him. And but I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there who would be like, yeah, you know, a lot of other heroes out there. And I'm not here to disrespect either way. What I would say is, so Nixon stayed in 42 to 46 active duty, switched over to the reserves from 1946 to 1966, and he ended up retiring as a commander in 05 in the U.S. Navy. So then, you know, he gets out of active duty in 46. Got to go find something to do. And what he ends up doing is running for Congress. You know, casual as shit, right?
Casual shit.
Yeah, you just casually go run for office. Well, he wins. And
so he was the man.
he honestly kind of was. Like, this dude's record's pretty fucking good. So from 1947 to 1950, he served California's 12th district in the U.S. House. Then gets elected to the U.S. Senate, 1950 to 1953. And like you just said, this guy's the man.
Hell yeah.
And a lot of people thought he was the man. Including advisors to Dwight Eisenhower.
Oh, shit.
And they said, this is a really good guy who can come in and not cause headaches.
That's Ike, right?
That's Ike.
That's Ike.
That's Ike. And so Nixon, he became the 36th Vice President of the United States from 1953 to 1961, serving Dwight Eisenhower. And again, he thought he was the man too. So he's like, I'm going to go run for president. Loses Jack Kennedy, JFK.
Dude, and the big thing was the debate that just turned the tide.
It absolutely turned the tide. What's also really interesting is when that debate happened in person, everyone thought Nixon looked fine. And there was no staff member running around being like, he looks pale, he looks old. There was nothing like that at all. And also, they were like, dude, he killed it. He creamed it. Right? Because they film it, the staff's there, there's no way to know how people are going to react yet. Nixon thought he won that debate. And then sure enough, it comes out in the papers, people see it on the TV, and they're like, dude, he's pale, he looks like a ghost, he looks sick, this is horrible. And Kennedy just blows up.
Which you have to wonder if Jack Kennedy's dad pumped some money into the newspapers to kind of, you know, highlight some of that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Some mafioso type shit.
I'm going to tell you, man, I feel like that's small brain. Dude, Kennedy, they stuffed the ballot boxes.
Oh, dude.
That is like, if you want to buy into any conspiracy, that's a pretty simple one to buy into.
Yeah.
Like, that one it's pretty crazy. You know, I think, Nixon for his time and place in 1960 looked like a great candidate. And
I believe it.
He checked all the boxes to be a great candidate. Military officer, got some medals. He did serve in World War II. He didn't dodge anything, although he actually had multiple opportunities at an exemption. So first of all, being a college student, but then also he's a Quaker. And there is actually an exemption kind of built in that if you were a Quaker, you could kind of duck out on the war.
But he didn't shy away.
He didn't shy away. And so you do kind of have to, be like, hey, man, it's pretty admirable. Also, at that time, he was actually working for the government in D.C. He was kind of like more like a clerk.
Okay.
Just kind of working for him, just kind of a small-time thing. But that would have given him the exemption to also not go. And he was like, no, I'm going to go over. I'm going to do my thing. So, 1960, he loses. It's real embarrassing for him. Sad day. But eventually, the Republicans are like, we kind of need someone to step up here, kind of knock Lyndon Johnson out of here. So this is about 1967-ish. And they're looking around. They're like, who the fuck are we going to pick, right? You got this upstart guy out in California, Ronald Reagan, an absolute nobody, right? And
some fucking washed up actor.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, he's not ready. No one's ready for this yet. And they're like, Rockefeller, nah, people don't like the rich, like this is bad. And then they realized they had a man who, again, has a perfect resume to be a 1960s president, who has the background as a common man, is military officer with medals. Richard Nixon. Richard Milhouse Nixon. Milhouse. Oh, what a tough name.
But back then, it was probably a fucking pussy getter.
No, there's no way. So, they go to him, the GOP, and they're like, we want you to be president. And he's like, I don't want to be president. And so he wins, man. He wins. 1968, takes office in 1969.
He's back to being the man.
He's back to being the man. He's the 37th president of the United States. It's chaos, man. So he ends up having 2 vice presidents. And the first one was Spiro Agnew, 69 to 73. And we're not going to go too much into Spiro Agnew. Honestly, I'm not going to do anything more than what I've said so far on the guy. But we could do a whole nother podcast on how scandalous this man was and just what a fool he was at the same time. But we'll save that for another day. So then we get Jerry Ford, Michigan man. And he ends up becoming the next vice president. Ultimately, he would become the 38th president of the United States. But we'll get to that a little bit later. Just want to tease it a little bit.
That's important, for sure.
Now, in doing a little bit of research for this, I found a quote. And it's from Nixon. It was spoken by Nixon at his first inauguration speech. And I'm just going to read it for you guys, and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
In these difficult years, America has suffered from a fever of words, from inflated rhetoric that promises more than it can deliver, from angry rhetoric that fans discontents into hatreds, from bombastic rhetoric that postures instead of persuading. We cannot learn from one another until we stop shouting at one another, until we speak quietly enough so that our words can be heard as well as our voices.
Hindsight's pretty 40-40 there.
That's pretty good. I was going to say, dude, if someone walked up and gave those exact words, I'd probably be like, I'll vote for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's relevant to today.
Yeah.
But given what happened and how,
it comes up. Yeah, there's some irony there.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really good place to start with Nixon, really, is that speech. Him taking office as president and saying those words. What's also really interesting are some of the policies that he began to enact. And we're going to start with foreign policy. Nixon is incredibly admired for some of the moves that he made as a foreign diplomat for the U.S. Definitely, it's a shady history, and it's difficult to compliment the man ever.
Yeah.
But his decisions in relation to China and the Soviet Union, making trips to both in 1972, he popped over in China in February and then headed over to the Soviet Union in May. He had a camera crew with him in China, and it was the first time that American citizens had a open window, an ability to see into what communist China was like.
That's actually kind of crazy. I didn't know that.
It really wasn't. I mean, people are sitting at home, and first of all, you're seeing probably, we'll say, the top 5 enemy of the United States, probably like number 2, maybe number 3 at the time. And we're watching our president, shake the head of the Communist Party in China's hand. He's like, what's up, man? Even though that was a huge fiasco the last time that China and a U.S. diplomat had met in public, the U.S. diplomat wouldn't shake his hand. And that was in like the 50s. And so for Nixon to be very warm, very open about it all. And then going over to the Soviet Union, there were two really big things about that. So the China mission, it was more like, we want to be friends, but we also acknowledge that you're the little brother. And so when he went to the Soviet Union, that's where he was a diplomat. And they were making deals. So two big things came out of the Soviet Union trip, being SALT I, and then the anti-ballistic missile treaty. So really what these were is an agreement. It was the first time that these two countries, their leaders, came together and said, we need to stop building nuclear weapons. And the crazy thing about the anti-ballistic missile treaty is, you know about Star Wars? Let me jump ahead 15 years here.
I know a little bit about Star Wars.
Yeah, you like Ronald Reagan's program. Not the fiction movie.
No,
Okay. So Star Wars was this idea that we would build a system of lasers that would shoot down any nuclear weapons in the atmosphere.
What?
And Nixon, all the way back here in 1972, was busy making deals with the Soviet Union saying, we're not going to do this, you're not going to do this, we're going to start tamping down weapons. This is the first step towards actually ending the Cold War.
What?
And it's absolutely nuts that he's doing this in an election year, especially when
that's risky.
That's very risky.
Shit.
And it's very interesting that he was able to go this course and then be successful with it, because Kennedy beat him by being aggressive against the Soviet Union. In 1960, when Kennedy's running against Nixon, it was a huge deal about a missile gap. And some people said it was a lie. A lot of people believed it, though.
Okay.
And Kennedy was like, we need more missiles. We need to be strong. We need to be powerful. Nixon was like, hey, Eisenhower's a great president. I'm going to do what Eisenhower did. And just kind of like played it cool and whatnot. But here was Nixon. Again, he had already been told by the American public they don't like the weakness. They don't want things to kind of fade away. We can't lose the Cold War. And he's busy telling them, I'm ending the Cold War. It's kind of bold.
That's wild.
It's really bold. And then you look at the Republican Party today, and you have people who are out here just ready to saber rattle at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
And Nixon was the most powerful Republican. And I really want to reiterate this point a couple of times. This was a conservative president who ran as a conservative president, actually acting on liberal values.
That's crazy.
As president. And it's going to keep coming back. So
wait, he's a man of certain convictions for sure.
So that's an interesting question. Because we're going to skip over some things that he did. We are not going to go too far into, his decisions in regards to Vietnam, but we just don't have time. We can save it for another day. When it comes to convictions with Nixon, I think that Quaker background made an impact. I think he did believe in... I think he took it almost in a sense where, okay, you need to have values. You need to have certain things that are really, really important to you. You need to live by them. But then he was pretty gray about it.
Just like, yeah.
It was one of those things where like, well, those are my values for me. Like, you're below me. I'm Richard Nixon. I'm the fucking man.
I'm the president of the world.
Yep. Futurama, baby, just ahead. Makes it work. So, just to reiterate one more time, that Nixon is one of the most qualified men to ever be elected president. He came into office campaigning and speaking as a unifying image, and let's be frank, he actually was when it comes to his foreign policy. So, before we keep going, what questions do you have about Nixon so far?
Oh, man. I mean, the obvious elephant in the room is, what year, diplomacy, right? Then he had with the Soviets. Are we talking pre... That was an election year, right?
1972, so he's running for re-election.
Running for re-election.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess the big question is, Watergate during that time?
So this man knows his calendar.
Yes.
This man knows his calendar.
Yes.
So let me reiterate the date again for when he went to the Soviet Union. That was May 1972. And the summer of 1972 is about to become really important here in a couple minutes.
Okay.
So let's keep plowing ahead a little bit. So we've talked about the foreign policy.
Also, wait.
Yeah.
Wait.
No. Go ahead.
Hate to cut you off.
No. I love it. Cut me off more.
Was Nixon a married man?
He was a married man.
That's awesome. That's good stuff.
He's a married man. And, want to know the one political gift he admitted to ever receiving?
What is that?
Oh, that would be a dog.
What's the dog's name?
Checkers.
Okay.
Like the restaurant.
Okay.
Not like a game or anything like that. But, yeah, he gave this whole speech, actually.
He receives a political gift.
Yeah, so basically people accused him of different, improprieties as an elected official at different times. He basically gave a whole speech saying, I'm poor as fuck, dude. And his wife is furious about it. She was like, no, I'm not about this. Like, we don't have to be that rich, but maybe don't tell the world, like, that we're not rich. Like, that's not cool. And, he says in the speech, the only gift I've ever received was my dog, Checkers. And, yeah. So it was actually really famous, and everyone thought it was... See, those are those moments where he was really successful in.
Yeah, that's like an honest moment.
Exactly. He could have honest moments, and even if they weren't actually honest, they felt honest.
That's the key.
Because there is a layer to this man that...
He knew the rhetoric. So
he knew the
key
rhetoric.
Is, that's important to hone in on.
Mm-hmm.
It felt honest.
It absolutely felt honest. This man, if we only looked at his career up into winning re-election in 1972, and had he lost that and just moved on, that was the end of him. You would be like, this is a really amazing story. This is an amazing man. What a unifying leader. Where would we be without him? But then we just need to go a little bit further, and things start to really unravel for him. And it stops looking like, what a great man. And it's more like, you really were just an actor. And he actually was trained as an actor growing up. And he loved theater. And so when you start to connect some dots with this man, you're like, dude, how long was he planning this for certain things?
Yeah,
and then what were his actual goals in all of this? Was it just about power? Was it about money? Did he actually want to help and then just also felt like profiting from it? The man's very complex on a lot of levels. And that's where his domestic policy really begins to undercut a lot of his successes.
Okay.
And honestly, he inherited a really shitty situation. So he gets elected, takes office in 1969. Inflation's already at 4.7%. It's the highest it had been in a century. And people are kind of freaking out. Unemployment really wasn't that bad yet, but they kind of see some warning signs, and they're like, I don't know what the fuck's coming, but we're not happy with this. And again, you have a guy who ran on being conservative, so you're kind of expecting him to be able to fix this.
Yeah.
That would be the idea at the time. So the interest rates were at the highest they had been in a century. People are a little nervous, and he literally spends 2 years basically trying to throw anything at this. He doesn't really care about domestic policy. He's kind of like, dude, my thing's foreign policy. It's what I want to do. Why do I have to deal with this shit? Like, whatever. Almost like let him eat cake. Like, whatever we can do to solve this quick, get it over with. I'm in, out. Okay. I'm over this. They end up coming up with a plan called Nixon Shock. And I really recommend people going and reading on this further if you want to. It gets very boring and very tedious. So if you're into nerdy economic policy, it's right up your alley.
Right up your alley, yeah.
But Nixon Shock as a plan in 1971, essentially, the big thing that comes out of this is Nixon ends the gold standard. And he is the reason that we end up completely changing the way that we value currency in the entire world. And
shit.
there's a big reason as to why this was such a big deal. What this did was it ended what was called the Bretton Woods system, which, again, if you're super into very boring economic policy, World War II recovery stuff, please go read it for yourself. Here are the big highlights on Bretton Woods.
Lay 'em out.
So basically what it did was it guaranteed countries had to honor, who were all a part of it, which is essentially just us and our allies.
Okay.
And it guaranteed countries had to honor convertibility of their currencies to US dollars to within 1% of fixed parity rates. Also established the IMF, or International Monetary Fund, which did a really good job with making sure no country really went bankrupt. Okay. It was kind of like a World Bank being able to get money out to kind of stabilize markets at different times. So let me dumb that down a little bit further for you. Bretton Woods basically made the US dollar the global standard for currency. It protected the US in case of any global economic issue, and it gave our allies a reason to stay loyal to us rather than the communists beyond only our military. This was a big deal. And the other thing is, right when this happened, gold price kind of dropped. Like right when he made this decision. And not just gold, but also silver and other metals that we were using to value currencies off of. But what this whole thing was really about, so 1971, when this is enacted, the inflation was at 5.84%. It was up more than a full point from when he had taken office. Things are not looking good. He's got to make a big move.
Oh, God.
This is his big move.
Yeah.
And in some way, and it did lower inflation at first, and things got better. And because of the time period of when he did this, it actually made him more popular. Not a lot of common people were sitting there going, I wonder what this is going to do to us in 4 or 5 years. Or being able to understand what it was going to do to them in 4 to 5 years. It didn't turn out that great, to be completely honest.
Okay.
But also, what ends up happening is, when it comes to foresight, I don't know how much foresight Nixon actually had in the long run. I think he was really good at taking care of himself. But this decision, ultimately, it's what leads to neoliberalism. And then the Thatcher-Reagan 1980s, this global free trade. This is what leads to NAFTA. This is what leads to the idea of a global free market. This ability to come off of the gold standard and make basically just everything way more relative to each other, way more fluid, basically makes money fake. Completely fake. That's where we hit a point where you end up with the 2008 housing crisis. That's how you end up with the 1987 economic freefall. Like, this is actually how we end up in the situation of all these crises that we've had since Nixon was in office. Yeah. It all comes back to this decision when it comes to the economic side. So it does work out for him, though. And he wins re-election in 1972. And he doesn't just win, you know. Obama won re-election by a very narrow margin, historically and relatively. I believe it was actually the closest re-election race there had ever been.
I know,
that was successful.
In Obama's election going into it, he was only up like 2 or 3%.
It was tight. It was very, very tight.
It was so tight.
So Nixon wasn't like that. No. The Electoral College votes, when the votes were tallied in 1972, Nixon won 520 to 17.
What the hell?
Over 60% popular vote. Domination, dude. Domination across the board.
They loved the man.
You would think. They clearly thought he was the shit. Again, ego. He believes he's the man.
Yeah.
He can basically walk on water at this point, at least in his own mind. And, you know, so the election takes place in November 1972. Nixon had already visited China and the Soviet Union, and he pulls off one of the most dominant election wins in American history. Remember, this is a very insulated man, actually, in Washington. Henry Kissinger is basically his inner circle when it comes to interacting with the larger community. And who Kissinger likes, that's who Nixon gets to see. So you're not getting a lot of real discussion.
Okay.
This is a true yes man circle by the time we get to 1972 and beyond. This is a group that is borderline mafioso in a way when it comes to how they operate with each other.
That can enable a certain subset of decisions.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And a big thing that I think a lot of people miss when things like this are discussed is makes self-preservation really important as a value. All of a sudden, it's not about the office of the president. It's about Richard Nixon, the president. It's not about the historical standard of things. It's about me and my place in them. And that's where it begins to really, I think, knock some things off the rails for him. So the other thing is, with a lot of decisions Nixon made, he was actually becoming more and more popular outside of Washington and becoming less and less popular within Washington. So, this man just dominated, right? 520 electoral votes. Domination, right? America loves him. They're telling him, we like what you're doing, keep doing it. However, like top senators, top House of Representatives members, top interest groups, they don't have access.
So this probably makes a lot of sense. This will be a name that comes up later, but Howard Hunt, he probably fucking hated Nixon.
Oh, dude, I'm not going to lie. I don't know anyone who loved Nixon. You had the people that were close to him who are willing to deal with Kissinger and Nixon together. They're just people who want power. And they're willing to put on the show, and they're willing to do what they need to keep Kissinger happy. No one fucking liked Kissinger. People respected Nixon, but they were willing to do what it took to be in that circle.
Oh, shit.
And so that's, again, where you get a lot of people who are like, you need me to lie, you need me to do this, you need me to put tape on the door. What you need me to do, I got you. And it leads to a terrible cycle in the end for this man. But also, I don't think these were the best guys anyway, so.
Damn. Which also, too, to reiterate that point, the do anything it takes to get into that circle. Also, too, what starts during this time is Bohemian Grove.
Oh.
So that's a whole other can.
Oh my goodness. We'll definitely do a lot of time on Bohemian Grove.
We'll have to.
Dude, that shit is fucking insane. But it's the same idea.
Nixon even commented on it.
Yeah, he did. And that's one more thing I think that goes in the ballot against him, because Nixon, he's shown that he's willing to go to China and the Soviet Union.
He'll do anything.
Arguably, if you want to buy into the intelligence community assassinated Kennedy because he was like, you know what, fuck the generals, I can do this myself. They got all pissed after the Bay of Pigs. You want to believe that's the reason they killed Kennedy? Nixon, absolutely. I don't know how he survives other than not letting anyone around him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is really what happened. And so it is pretty wild with this man, and everything that he kind of starts to touch, you begin to wonder, is he a conservative? Like, really? Because a lot of things he does, like being willing to talk about Bohemian Grove, he recognized its existence. We talked about going abroad, but there are other things that really begin to make you kind of wonder, how did people really, on the right, how did people in the Republican Party really feel about this man? Because Nixon rolls out a policy that he calls New Federalism. And basically it's about giving power back to the states and shrinking the federal government. And one of the first things he did was he actually dissolved the U.S. Post Office Department. So there used to be a cabinet position in the president's cabinet, and that person was the head of the post office. And he was like, well, I don't fucking need you here. And so he actually creates the U.S. Postal Service, the USPS, which, again, is actually an example of socialism.
Oh, shit.
In 1970, Richard Nixon established the EPA, supported the Clean Air Act, and OSHA, which established increased workplace safety rules. These are incredibly socialist and populist ideas, each of them. And there were even further environmental acts that he would publicly come out and say, I actually really support the act. I just want a little bit less money going to it because I don't want the government spending the money on this, but I want the policy. This man was pushing out policies that today would make Bernie Sanders look centrist in comparison. So there's another one that a lot of people, I think, don't fully realize was actually Nixon's idea. And Chuck, tell me, have you heard about a thing called the Affordable Care Act?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you know its nickname?
Obamacare, right?
Obamacare, yes.
That's the nickname.
That's the nickname. And so obviously, it was enacted under President Barack Obama. But you want to know who basically had the exact same plan?
Please educate me.
Richard Nixon.
No shit.
Richard Nixon. This man, in no way, except for bombing Cambodia. That's it. This is the only thing that makes him look like a Republican. Everything else across the board, you're like, this is a centrist Democrat. By today's standards, at least, if not a far left guy.
No, he's basically Biden.
Okay, so that I did kind of think about that, and did I want to make that comparison? In a certain way, I do see there's a lot of similarities in a willingness to push against your own side, but also side with being a centrist. And basically, there is a little bit of similarity there. I think in the end, it is a stretch. I think that there are better fits for both men to be compared to. And we can do that some other time. Kind of comparing some stuff.
We'll whip out a President's Comparable podcast. You know?
Oh, absolutely. But here's some of the extra things that Nixon had that, again, not everyone was that pissed about as a common American citizen. And Fox News isn't going to like this. But Nixon wanted to have the employer mandate to have to cover everyone with health insurance. He wanted federalization of Medicaid for poor families with minor children, and ultimately wanted to make healthcare just absolutely less expensive for everyone. And it's hard to believe an elected Republican today agreeing to any of that. And yet this man won 520 electoral votes running on that platform. Crazy. So Nixon even went further than this too. And he wanted to end the use of addictive drugs in rehab for Vietnam vets. He was the first person to call for a war on drugs, not Nancy Reagan. And
That gets lost.
And let's be clear, he did not only mean illegal narcotics. He's not talking about street drugs only, but he is.
You know, actually, hold on a second.
Mm-hmm.
I will say...
you think Nancy's hot?
It makes us... No.
It's a little too old for you.
Don't worry.
Just not your type, right?
Definitely not. It makes a lot of sense that Nixon gets kind of overlooked on the war on drugs stuff because Nancy comes out on national television.
Yep.
And she does the whole drugs thing.
America very quickly after Nixon wanted to forget him. It was move on, like, we're just going to act like that didn't happen.
Stain.
He really was. He went from being the man to the stain.
The stain. Richard Nixon is the stain.
Look, when it came to Nixon, America was like 25-year-old masturbating, where it's like, I thought I was past this with my life, but I guess I'm not. And they just wanted to forget what they had done. Just the awful state, the shame, the absolute shame. Okay. But he was talking about prescription drugs too. He really was actually, at least publicly with his rhetoric, was concerned about addictive prescription drugs. So this man not only is relatively fighting against fossil fuels, at least limiting what they can do. He's fighting against big pharma. He's fighting against the hawkish right in America. He's fighting against anyone who thinks the Cold War is a good thing. He's fighting everyone, especially everyone in Washington.
Yeah.
He is incredibly unpopular in Washington circles because of all these things. People, again, they really do respect him on the right. It's like, he's the president. Look at this mandate he has. He's won with such a huge growth of support. The common man seems to really like him. He's got this great story. He did serve in World War II. Like, I mean, this thing just always followed him. He had this legacy to him. But people were also like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, he really does begin to step on a lot of very powerful toes as he just kind of willy-nilly is trying to help people. And it's a very interesting point to look at. But what's also crazy is how effective he is with it. So he gets these things through.
Yes.
You know, Kennedy was a big guy who he talked about things. But Kennedy didn't have a lot of time. He was only in office for really like 2 years, and then he gets shot. And he didn't do anything. People love Kennedy, though. Nixon, arguably the most effective president ever. Hated. And it's a fascinating thing to think about. And there's one more thing that's really interesting about some of these, I'm going to say, socialist ideas that Richard Nixon had. He also declared a war on cancer.
Interesting.
And he wanted increased funding for sickle cell anemia research and treatment. Now, all of a sudden, let's really blow the top off of things. Every racist in America now hates him even more. Because you think about part of the way that he dominated in that 1972 election is people are still pissed about the Civil Rights Act under Kennedy and LBJ. And the whole South went from being Southern Democrats to being Republicans. And they're all racist as shit. And now all of a sudden, we have a man, Richard Nixon, who says, I want to put money into a disease that almost exclusively affects African Americans. People are, every single spot that he could have simultaneously helped one group and also majorly pissed off another group, he did it. He did not give a fuck.
He's the man.
He didn't give a
He's
fuck,
literally
dude.
the man.
He's like, I'm going to fucking help these people. And honestly, he did. He gave land back to Native American reservations. This man, like, when you just look at some of these policies, he's a great president. But we all know how the story ends.
It's so
hard. It's so confusing. This man it's beyond complication. It's like actual, I feel like he literally was like multiple personalities, just acting out.
We love these figures throughout history that are like, there's so much
We
wrapped
love to
up
learn
into
about 'em.
one bundle. It takes literally, we're like 40 minutes in, but it's like, we could sit here for a fucking whole night and just talk Nixon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Chuck and Clay's podcast. If you like what you heard or you want to hear the full episode, come over to patreon.com. We'll see you soon.